Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that we may always grow in fidelity to you. We ask that we may seek to do your will. We ask that you always remind us the importance of prayer in our lives in order to do your will. We ask that you show us those ways that lead us to compromise our values and to turn our back on you so that we, recognizing them ahead of time, we turn back to you and we seek to glorify your name. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Well, today is indeed Tuesday of the 33rd week of Ordinary Time. And as I said earlier, it's the penultimate week of Ordinary Time for this year. I love the word penultimate, in case you didn't know that. I absolutely love that. It's one of my favorite words. So that and my favorite oxymoron, as you know, is a community of hermits. Well, we are continuing in Maccabees, and yesterday we heard from 1 Maccabees, and now we are reading from 2 Maccabees. Now, remember the scenario. It's about 100 years before Christ, and what's happening is that there is a compromise between the Jews and the Gentiles. And what's happening is for expediency, that everything's going to go well, that they are more prosperous and everything else. What they decide is that there will be a union of the Gentiles and the Jews, but in order for this to happen, they're going to turn their back, the Jews are going to turn their back on some of their customs and more embrace the Gentile customs. Now, something to keep in mind here. On the surface, there's nothing wrong with that in general. I studied some anthropology at UMass Boston. And so there's always that interest in other cultures. And I certainly have always been one of those. I'm very interested in other cultures, always have been. And so that is always there. I'm always fascinated by how other Catholics in other countries live their faith and all the different routines. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is that gives growth to this process of embracing wholesale the Gentile way and the Jews turning their back on the Jewish way, including the commandments. And the first commandment is, thou shalt not have false gods before you. So they start worshiping the Gentile gods, and this is a huge mistake. Now, why is it a huge mistake? Well, first of all, throughout the Old Testament, there is this description of these Gentile gods as being nothing but pieces of wood, and you're worshiping nothing but pieces of wood. A lot of people think that Catholics worship statues. We don't. It is actually a sign of a person who was devoted to Christ, who we believe to be a saint, and so we use that as a focus of prayer, but we are not worshiping statues. We do not, as in the case you'll see in yesterday's reading, we do not light incense to statues, and we don't worship, for example, St. Francis of Assisi. We see them as models of holiness that we want to emulate so that we may grow in holiness too, because our focus always is on Christ. But what's happening here is they are turning their back on God completely, and they are embracing these Gentile gods, which of course would be the Greek gods that we probably know from our history, all of them, Zeus and Apollo and all the other stuff. So they start lighting incense to them, and eventually what happens is that there is this call for this one happy religion. And so the Jews have to start letting go of some of their customs so that they may have this one happy religion and live in peace and harmony and everything else. And that's blasphemy to the Jews. And so there are some that embrace it, but others say absolutely not. So in today's reading, what we have is Eleazar, and he is one of the foremost scribes, it says, and he's in advanced age. So he is an authority figure in the community, and he's being forced to open his mouth and eat pork. Why? Because Jews are forbidden to eat pork, Gentiles can. And the whole thing was he's being forced to eat pork so that he will follow the law. And you have to understand what this is. This is Eleazar. He's being told to eat pork. He's being forced or else. And what's happening is he's saying no. Why? Because of his example. One of the first things that popped into my mind when I saw this reading in preparation for today's talk is this. You may have seen the movie. It's a classic. It comes back in the early days of the talkies, the early days of the career of James Cagney, and I believe it's Public Enemy is the name of the movie. Well, what I want to focus on is here he is, this tough guy. He's the public enemy. He's the really tough gangster. And I think it was a priest. And, there he was. And so here he's the tough guy, the whole bit. Well, when it comes to the end, he is convicted of murder, I guess, and he is given the electric chair. And the priest says to him, please, you've got all these kids who are emulating you, who are following you, who want to be just like you, and they're going to end up in the same place that you are. You don't want that to happen. Please at least do this. When you go to the electric chair, go as a coward. Beg for your life. Make it look like that you are just totally afraid and you aren't anything what you were. And, that's what he asks him to do. And it's this powerful scene because his whole thing is if I do that, then it'll undermine who I truly am. But he's also saying, but if you do that, it'll send a model to those kids and they will turn away from that way of life. So how do... it's very similar dynamic to what you see with Eleazar in reverse. If I eat that pork, I'm sending a model to everyone else that I don't believe in this stuff. No, I will not eat this pork. And understand, you're literally saying, he could literally be turning around, this is not what happened, but just imagine this, wine on the table, candles, the whole bit, rice and pork and everything else with great birthday cake or whatever, and just eat the pork, will you? No, that's not what happened. They tried to force him to eat it, and when they put it in his mouth, he spit it out. Why? Because he needs to testify to the power of God. So that's what he's doing. He is testifying to God, this God that he has unity with through the covenant, and no, he will not do it. And it's a powerful story because what is he doing? He's saying, no, my role is to witness to the covenant. My role is to witness to the God of Moses. And so what happens is if he doesn't eat the pork, and they're begging him. It's like the guards around who are forcing him through this, begging him, look, would you just eat the pork? And he won't. And finally, what they realize, they have no other alternative but to kill him. And so they execute him. They actually torture him to death. And they actually get angry with him because they thought his doing this was utter madness. But what was he doing? He was testifying to God. And so he died, but he knew that he died in devotion to God. And so he knew that he was faithful to the one he truly loved, who is, of course, God. So it's a powerful dynamic here that's going on where he's recognizing and he's realizing that, no, he has to witness to God. Now, I want to say something here because we're going through this whole thing with the mandates. I'm not going to get into that argument because, for one thing, the mandates are not denying us communion. They aren't denying us presence of the church. However, on a whole different level, the minute you turn around and you've said, I don't need to go to church anymore, I need to be focused on that which is going to help me make it in the world today. I have to do this. I'll eventually get to church, but right now I don't. There's no need for it. I'm not a bad person. That is a compromise of your commitment that you received at baptism, first communion, and confirmation. So if you turn around and say, I refuse the vaccine mandates because of what? Well, if you're not going to church and you haven't been going since long before the COVID, then you're not going to do it on religious values because you've already done that. And so it's not from that perspective. And we are not at the point in vaccine mandates that you are in the case of Maccabees. And I want to say that we're not. If anyone ever asks me whether or not you should take the vaccine, my response will always be, go talk to your doctor. And that's what you need to do. I am not a doctor. I'm not going to answer that question for you. You need to talk to your doctor. And of course, the other thing is we're talking about the issue of prosperity and peace in the community. In Maccabees, we're not talking about a virus. So obviously you'd have to look at compromises, and maybe there's a seed there that we have to look at, but we're not there yet. The seed hasn't sprouted. So you want to keep an eye on that. But we do have to understand that if we've compromised in our relationship with God in the way that we say, I'm not going to take the vaccine because of my religious commitment, and say, well, when was the last time you went to church? When was the last time you prayed? When was the last time, but I believe in God. Well, that doesn't mean anything. The devil believes in God. So you see that dynamic. You see there may be similarities, but they are not the same. And you have to understand this as well. These people went to the point where they would choose death over eating pork. So if you had a situation where here is the vaccine here is the electric chair here, you have a choice of one or the other, and you have to abandon your faith in order to get the vaccine, or if you want to embrace your faith, there's the electric chair, take the electric chair. There you go. Because you're being told to reject your faith. We're not in that position right now with the vaccine, but where we are is understanding that anytime we've compromised in the interest of prosperity or safety within reason. I mean, if the mayor is telling you don't go out of the house because there's 6 feet of snow on the ground, you don't have to go to church. Guess what? You don't have to go to church. That's a different concept. But if you're turning around and saying, I'd like to go to church, but I want to make sure I take this time instead to study harder for this test I have tomorrow, you've made that compromise. We'll talk more tomorrow. Remember our website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. Check out our website. Send us a communication if you want to, the contact thing. Send us a donation if you'd like to tell us. Show us ways that you're listening to this program and you're appreciating it. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day. We will talk to you again tomorrow, and we'll see you then. In Cristo vivimos.